Hello, and welcome to another installment of Lean Focus webinar series. My name is Damon Baker, and I'm the CEO of Lean Focus. And today's webinar topic is entitled Bringing the Outside In to Your Annual Strategic Planning Process. Today's an especially interesting webinar series in that we'll be co-presenting with our strategic partner, BroadBranch Advisors. And in a minute, we'll explain who they are and what they do, along with Lean Focus's panelist guest as well. A few housekeeping topics before we get started in today's content. This is proprietary information. We ask that you only use this for the express purpose of this webinar. This webinar will be emailed to you about a day after the conclusion of the webinar. Please look in your spam folder in case you do not receive this. And if you are unable to get the email, we do post all of our webinar videos, links to our website on the thought leadership page of our website. And those are also linked to our YouTube channel, Lean Focus LLC, where all these videos are archived. And you can watch not only this webinar, but all of our historical webinars and interviews from the different series that we do. All participants that have joined us today will be placed in listen-only mode. We highly encourage that you engage in some thoughtful Q&A at the end of today's session. We should have about 15 minutes or so upon the conclusion of today's topic. And if you look in the bottom of your control panel, you'll see a Q&A option. You can click that, enter your question. I will be the moderator for those questions, and I will be posing those questions on a first-come, first-served basis at the end of today's webinar, time allowing. And a little bit before we get started on the topic about Lean Focus. So Lean Focus is a management consultancy and talent search firm, and we believe in lean transformation for the businesses and the clients that we partner with. And we believe that's a three-part equation. Driven leaders who are steeped in lean principles, guided by a set of 14 lean principles that really govern our decision-making and our behaviors in a lean culture. And then proven systems and tools that can be leveraged to solve problems, to drive operational excellence, growth, margin expansion, all these sorts of benefits that you get out of doing this sustainably year after year. We organize ourselves internally in 8 practice areas. Today's topic is going to straddle a few of these practice areas, probably primarily growth for the most part. And inside of growth, we deal with commercial challenges involving sales and marketing, where the ambition or the strategic intent oftentimes is to organically grow and to do so more profitably, faster than your competition, faster than the market. And then also the topic for today has a pretty heavy component in M&A, which in our private equity practice, we deal a lot with M&A activities. So we'll talk about how today's topic can accelerate some of the actions there and align your strategies better. And then we also have an operations practice, which is more how lean is thought of traditionally. How do you apply lean thinking and tools to the 4 walls of a factory, extending that, moving counterclockwise now? How do you extend lean to your extended supply chain? So outside the 4 walls of your factory with your supply chain partners, looking at things like procurement, spend, supply chain risk, logistics and freight, moving around innovation. So innovation is a subcomponent of growth. Moving further to the left, upstream of sales and marketing, how do we ideate amazing products? And this is where BroadBranch plays a great role as well. Thinking about getting that critical VOC from your customers at different stages of the new product development process and the innovation cycle to ensure that what you're developing and commercializing actually resonates with your customer in terms of a value proposition. And leadership practice is all about culture, people, and talent inside the organization, and making sure that you have the right performance management systems in place, talent succession and development plans. And then Focus Solutions is about our business system itself. So many of our clients have an appetite to build their own business system that is proprietary to them. And rather than spend the years and millions of dollars trying to develop that on their own from scratch, they can white label our tools to build out their own business system over time. And then lastly is talent solutions. As I mentioned on an earlier slide, driven leaders are a really key ingredient to the lean transformation. We actually partner with our clients to place leaders inside of the companies that we work with, all the way from CEOs down to managerial level, with the common thread being that these are lean leaders that have great lean experiences, hands-on, that have the right behaviors that can really accelerate this lean transformation. So where have we done this and what types of industries have we worked in? You can see just a snapshot. So the last about 7.5, 8 years, Lean Focus has worked in upwards of about 700 clients, ranging in size from Fortune 10 companies all the way down to pre-revenue, venture-funded capital startups, if you will, and everything in between. Publicly traded, privately held, service-oriented businesses, of course, manufacturing-oriented businesses. So we have a very broad representation of the clients that we work with, which to me is a testament to the broad applicability of lean and lean thinking across all the industries in the world. I mentioned earlier the toolbox in the business system specifically. So Lean Focus has a business system. We call it the Lean Focus Business System, or short LBS. And depending on the different situations within our clients, we will actually pull these tools to help solve problems in their business. So if there's a problem around growth, we have a set of tools to help them achieve their growth aspirations. If there's a problem around expanding margin and perhaps the issues are locally contained into the operations, we have a set of tools that can be leveraged to improve productivity, to improve costs of goods, to reduce quality and scrap and rework, and all these kinds of things. So I also like to think of this as competencies that need to exist within the organization in order for that lean transformation to be sustainable. So not only do we need to be using tools to solve problems, we need to be teaching our people how to use these tools so that when given a new challenge, they feel comfortable solving that problem using that tool. So let's get into today's agenda for the webinar. So we covered introductions. We have a section around Lean Focus's strategic planning process. And in a moment, I'll introduce your panelists who'll be talking about that. And then BroadBranch Advisors really adds to the completeness and to the power that strategic planning can get out of it by adding these tools and processes within to get these outside insights that companies struggle to get from their clients and from their customers. And then lastly, we'll end with Q&A. All right, so today is my esteemed pleasure to introduce my panelist, Eric Gerber. Eric, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great, thank you, David. Fabulous to be here with all of you today. Strategic planning is one of my favorite topics, and I currently lead up the growth pillar for Lean Focus. But prior to that, worked on, actually led the strategic planning process from 2007 to 2003 in 4 different companies, from a $50 million a year private equity-based company to a $5 billion a year public company, and everything in between. And there's a lot of differences, as all of you can imagine, across that range of companies, but there's some definite commonalities as it relates to strategic planning that I'm excited to get into today. And with that, I'll hand it across to Courtney to introduce herself as well.
Hi, everyone. My name is Courtney Matson. I'm the managing partner here at BroadBranch Advisors. Thank you so much to Damon and Eric for this opportunity to work together and the partnership that we've had so far. So I've been with BroadBranch Advisors for about 7 years. BroadBranch Advisors is a boutique strategy consulting firm that is focused on exactly what you're going to hear about today. The rationale behind bringing the outside in, that's what we do. That outside perspective, that's really our focus here. My background is in strategy. I was actually in the Foreign Service for about a decade before I came over to the private sector and BroadBranch Advisors doing country level strategy for USAID, the US government's aid agency. So nice to meet you all. Thanks for having me.
All right, with that, let's go ahead and dig in. I'm going to walk through kind of fundamentals around strategic planning and the kind of the basis for this the topic today about bringing the outside in. So next slide. So most companies, the majority of companies, mid-size and large companies, do strategic planning. Most of them do it annually. For those who have whose annual financial fall on the calendar year, now is oftentimes the strategic planning time of the year. You kind of get the strategic plan done between now and say September, something like this, October-ish. The financials get locked in. The last budget gets locked in for the end of the year. The hiring plan gets locked in, and then the first quarter of next year is when the hiring gets moves forward. Oftentimes, ideally, in alignment with what the strategic plan had was put together. So it's hopefully this is a germane time for all of you to be talking about this topic. Strategic planning is one of those things that everyone talks about. Many companies do. Most executives and leaders view as important, really essential to the growth of the business, but at the same time can be the source of a lot of frustration. It isn't always the case that the strategic planning process, although despite best efforts and a lot of hard work, works out and gives the kind of impact and outcome that it was intended to do. And it's clear that when it does work, it is impactful. It's quantitatively impactful to the financials of the business and the success of the business, but it's fraught. And so we're going to talk about one of those ways that it's fraught today, and one of the challenges there around kind of bringing the outside in. I want to kind of frame this up a little bit, and the strategic planning process accomplishes a lot of really important things in companies. It accomplishes the opportunity to go through the mission and vision and to update that, to align around priorities, to kind of get clarity about who's doing what and where we're moving forward, bringing the financials into play. But if we pull up to the highest level, our view is really that the ultimate purpose of the strategic planning process is to make sure that some portion of the company's resources, people, time, effort, intellectual capital, is being put to where the company needs to go, as opposed to where it would automatically go. I tend to think of companies as large, kind of living beings almost, and left to their own devices, they can walk off in some direction. That may or may not be the best direction for the company. Where is the money going? Where is the opportunity going? So the strategic planning process is a lot about change management, and it's a lot about making sure that we're doing sometimes small, sometimes very large course corrections to where the company needs to go. That, however, begets the question, Eric, where does the company actually need to go? So next slide. So setting the strategic direction, where is the company needs to go? What we often see is that there's kind of two cases. The first case is kind of urgent and obvious. That's when there's a mandate for some internal gaps. Something has gone wrong. Everyone knows that it's not right, and it has to get fixed. And there's just not capacity, nor should there be, for doing something else other than fixing these critical problems. Things like regulatory agencies come in and there's a stop shipment, or a notice that's majorly impactful, or there's some operational issue around quality or delivery that's just clearly and significantly impacting revenue. It's right to focus in on those first, get those internal problems solved, understand what the gap to close is, and get that gap closed pronto. That's within the company's control. There's no question about that being a top priority. But when those kind of circumstances are not in play, it's often the case that the team thinks about what are our external opportunities and what are external challenges and what's going on outside of the company, and how do we take advantage of that, and how do we need to be mindful about that. And what I see in many strategic planning processes that kick off is it usually starts with a number of senior leaders coming together to kind of talk through these topics. And I think that's fantastic. It's really important for people to align. The senior leaders are running the business. They're close to it. They do know a lot of really important aspects to the business. But unfortunately, their views are often not always complete. They can be outdated, and they can be biased. Things like, that company's product is never really going to be successful in the market. I had a conversation with such and such customer and they didn't like it. Okay. I guess the issue there is that I want to highlight is it's not that the executives are wrong. They have really important perspectives, but oftentimes they are helpful but not sufficient to have that full, thoughtful, nuanced view that's critical to really developing thoughtful strategic initiatives that are going to hit the mark. And the other aspect of this I see oftentimes is the teams moving too quickly to a SWOT-based analysis, something like this, where there isn't an established fact base for the SWOT. So when we're thinking about strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats, if we just utilize our internal expertise, then that can be biased, and it can certainly be relative to what? Like, what are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? Relative to what? If there isn't a strong fact base informing that SWOT, it can be very internally focused, and then that can undermine the development of the initiatives and the long-term impact. So, okay, if it isn't all about just starting solely with the executives or just starting with SWOT, where do we actually start? So next slide. What I've seen over and over again is that one of the most effective places to start is to start with market. So start with the question of what market are we in, or what market must we win in? And by laying it out and looking at it from a market view, it automatically transitions the entire team and the company towards an outside view. It transitions it towards a fact base where we're looking at us, but also the competitors, everyone else, the trends, and so on and so forth. Sometimes I hear people talk about market as though it were some kind of a theoretical construct. Our view at Lean Focus, very data-driven, very fact-based, is that a market is a rich data-based fact. It's not a theoretical construct. And that fact of the market is determined by the sum of the invoices between the suppliers and consumers, organizations that buy. So if you can define your market, and if for some reason you were omniscient, you could calculate with great precision exactly who has what positions where, how large, and based on what segments. And so it's not always easy to get that information, but it is inherently a fact-based external position to start with market. And it defines the broader game board. So the market view should be consistent for all of the players that you're competing against. So everyone should be playing in the same market as you've defined it. And you can see the opportunities in the segment, which ones are growing, how are things changing. Courtney's going to go into this in a lot more detail a little bit in her section. But I think I just want to highlight again, starting with the market is this really powerful way. It's subtle. That's a very powerful way to pivot from an internal perspective to an external perspective that can inform the strategic planning process. So let me talk a little bit more about how this fits into the flow of the strategic planning process of Lean Focus. Next slide. So the market view is part of a larger pack of work that we call a situational analysis. So the situational analysis is framed and structured like a skeleton based on the expertise and the smarts of the executives and the leaders and the product managers and the R&D folks who lead the business. So we frame it up through their insight, but then we flesh it out by bringing in the external information, the fact-based view to really develop a full landscape. And that landscape, once it becomes a fact-based view like that, or a block of knowledge that represents the external situation of the company, it is wonderfully reusable. It'll be clear, I hope, how it's definitely helpful in the strategic planning process. But that same fact-based view is critical in new product development, and it also is really valuable in terms of informing M&A. So it's multiply useful, and it stands alone. And it, unlike some of the more proprietary or secretive aspects of the strategic plan that you wouldn't want to broadly share, the situational analysis can be more broadly shared across the organization to align thinking, perspectives, and activities across your R&D, your product development, your strategic planning, your M&A. So what is a situational analysis? The situational analysis really has a number of interlocked pieces. First piece, like we talked about, is a segmented market map, often in a MECO format, that lays out the competitors, the segments, the growth rates, and so on and so forth. On top of that, we can provide annotations that lay out and make visible the competitive dynamics, and we can call out the rules of the game. who's winning in this market, who's losing in this market, why are they losing, why are they winning, based on our view, customers' view, competitors' view, and so on. We can also lay out what are some of the most important macro trends and external drivers that are impacting the whole market or potentially segments of the market. Many markets today are changing faster than they've ever changed before due to new technologies and new things that are happening. And it's really important to lay those things out and know where those impacts are going to be felt, when they're going to be felt, and which segments are going to feel them first, so that we can plan and make sure that we're moving towards where the money is, as opposed to where the money is going to be, as opposed to where the money is. And that's what we talk about with the future winning positions. All of that can be put together into a fact base, but it's important then that we transition and we carry that into the company itself. So we build the bridge, and the critical question for building the bridge is, okay, we've got this view, we can see what's going on. Then we have to ask ourselves, what problem or opportunity does this create for us specifically? And if we can lay out the problems and opportunities that are related to our company as a function of this external market view, that then tees up a very powerful basis for initiative development and what are we going to go and do about it. So when is the situational analysis needed? When is it helpful? Next slide. So hopefully some of these are familiar to all of you if you've been involved in strategic planning. This is not by any stretch of the imagination a comprehensive list at all. But here are some of the common questions that I hear. Even some of these I heard just this week from a client that we were talking with, which is, I'll just go through a few of them. There's oftentimes really fundamental questions about how big is the market? How's the market broken down? Sometimes folks have a view to that. But then there's this underlying question about, okay, are we winning or losing? Are we gaining share or losing share? And we're growing at a certain rate, but are we growing faster than the market? Are we growing slower than the market? Are we growing at market? Is our sales and marketing organization really kind of adding value and allowing us to get ahead? Or are they just keeping pace with the market growth? And how do we know, right? What's going on with our competitors exactly? We have our view, but what do customers think? What do the other competitors think about what's going on? Where are they gaining and losing share? How can we see their activity? If we look back 3 and 4 and 5 years, where are they focusing, and how does that change our position? What threat or opportunities that represent for us? And then, how impactful are some of the strategic moves of our competitors? This is a common one for executives to be biased about, is to downplay the strategic moves of competitors as not being impactful, because oftentimes initially they aren't all that impactful. Big strategic moves take a little bit of time to gain momentum, and the story can change over a couple of years and kind of sneak up on folks. And so being able to really know where those strategic moves are having impact, and if they actually are or are not, is a really great thing to have a fact-based view to. What do our customers view as our strengths and weaknesses? So rather than what we think they are, what do our customers view? What do our competitors view as our strengths and weaknesses? What is our suppliers view? Really helpful in terms of us thinking through what do we need to improve to become a stronger and more competitive organization. And of course, as I mentioned, the trends. I don't find that teams need to reach into lots of esoteric trends or things that are way far out there. Really just picking the trends that that folks really agree on as salient to the market, but then thinking through what are the implications of those trends for us and where are they going to impact us? And then I think the hard part is how quickly will they impact us is also really important. So Eric, sounds great. How do you go about getting all of this rich, fact-based, unbiased information to complement our own internal thinking and strategic planning process? Well, that leads us to the next slide, and I think the meat of the conversation today. Whereas Lean Focus works with a lot of clients on the strategic planning process and helping facilitate that, and has very strongly established and very effective proven processes for strategic planning, the rich content the dynamic content, the power of that is really brought to life in our partnership with BroadBranch Advisors. And so I want to take, at this point, hand the discussion across to Courtney to go through some of the work that they do so that you can see how these things complement each other. Courtney?
Thanks so much, Eric. Really appreciate that. So hopefully you've gotten a little bit of perspective on sort of what are those triggers that make you say, I might need some external perspective in order to really meaningfully make moves here. When you think about yourself, right, us, all of us, each of us is inside that center bubble, your organization, you in whatever role you're playing. But there's so many bubbles around you, right? And it's easy to think that you have that clear perspective on those parties. But just like, you know, when you go to the dentist and you think you've been flossing and brushing twice a day and I think everything looks great, and then I go into the dentist chair and she uses that darn little mirror and she looks behind the back of my bottom teeth and she's like, you've got buildup here. And I'm like, how is it that I couldn't see that but you can, right? It's that external perspective that he or she has that makes it so much more valuable. That's why we go to the dentist, hopefully, to be able to see. And you need that unbiased perspective in order to make sure that you're brushing and flossing and doing all the right things. So same concept applies here, right? The ability to tap into competitors, customers, other industry stakeholders, opinion leaders, and even regulators to understand that external environment affects how you operate and run your business, affects how trends and market dynamics and forces run, affects the way your competitors also behave, and obviously affects the way regulation changes. So understanding that external environment allows you to make better decisions. It allows you to better analyze those threats and opportunities, like Eric said. You can measure the way those trends are growing or changing. It helps you better stay ahead of your competition, giving you kind of real-time on-the-ground data and information as your customers' opinions, their decision-making process, their level of investment, their cadence for investment may be changing. Next slide, please. Great. So just to kind of drive this point home a little bit more, that traditional method of outreach tends to reap confirmation bias, right? Eric talked about it, right? An industry expert who's been in this field for 40 years, who's been working in the same family business for that whole time, thinks that they have a really good understanding of their external environment. But unless they go out to that to the external world and actually test it through a third party, they can't. That's really the focus here. Mainline consultants would be sort of your big players, and cottage consultants, of course, in this case would be sort of industry experts, right? So they may have that expertise, but the ability to focus on those external interviews, that's really what we do. We use a process called the Insight Engine. I'll tell you a little bit more about that later, but the point being, at the end of the day, if you're a client, you're coming to us and saying, I don't understand X, right? Eric gave some great examples. We'll talk about some other ones, but the reason that you're saying that is something's happened that you weren't expecting. And you don't come to me, Courtney Matson, saying, what's the answer, Courtney? I don't know the answer. You maybe don't know the answer, but we go out and say, don't know what that answer is. Let's go out and figure out who can answer that question for us. And then instead of taking an N of one perspective, we'll go out and talk to 20 or 30 or 40 people and triangulate on that answer to say, let's see what the market says. Let's see what your competitors are saying, your customers are saying, those other stakeholders, and complete that whole circle around you so you have a better picture of what that looks like. Now, you might be saying, well, yeah, I've done that before. I've done interviews with GLG or GuidePoint or Third Bridge or fill in the blank with whatever expert network you may have used. Those are great tools to use, and I'm not negating those in any way. But the value proposition of those tools is to give you a little finger pulse, a little touch. But ultimately, if you're going out and getting those perspectives from experts, guess what? So are all your competitors. So we go out and we source our sources, what we call wild, as compared with what we'd call a caged source. And I'll just use a quick cutesy story to reference this. My daughter, who's now 8 years old, when she was first learning about reading and stories, she did the Three Little Pigs. And she's like, Mommy, I don't understand why a wolf is so scary. It seems like it's no big deal. Why is he blowing down a house? And I was like, well, a wolf is actually a wild beast, right? A being. And they don't interact with other animals well. And she's like, I don't believe it. So I took her to the zoo. We went to the Washington, D.C. Zoo, which is right down the street from me here. And we went to the gray wolf exhibit. And it was lunchtime. The zookeeper kind of threw a piece of meat. The wolf came and picked it up and then ran to the corner and ate it in the corner. And she's like, see, it's just like a dog. And then, of course, I looked at the exhibit card and it said, this lone gray wolf was bred in captivity. And of course, I messed up my entire lesson here for my daughter, because the problem there is that wolf is behaving differently because they've never been raised in the wild, right? They don't have an understanding of what that wild dynamic is. We need to focus on the wild to understand how your market actually is behaving, not the way the cutesy version of the wolf in the zoo who's never been outside behaves. And that's the difference between a wild and caged source. Just something I want to make sure we underscore here. So the focus really is on the wild. We go out and source those experts ourselves. Next slide, please. Whoops. So kind of three core factors that we're going to talk about here. We're going to talk a little bit about the market landscape. We're going to talk a little bit about the competitive environment, and then, of course, strategic positioning. So you could come to us with any of these, but ultimately, in order to gain a full and complete picture of your external environment, you need to kind of tap into these three in some way. Now, sometimes you might just say, I have a quick and dirty question that I want to get answered about the size of this market or the shares of this competitor in this particular segment or something like that. That's fine too. But as Eric talked about, that kind of strategic planning process requires you to have a full perspective. So we're going to kind of unpack each of these together. Go ahead and head to the next slide, please. So here, let's talk a little bit about market landscape. So what are some of the questions that you might be thinking about when you're looking to understand your market landscape, right? How is a market structured? Is it very fragmented? Is it very consolidated? Is it mature, or is it still nascent, right? What percent of that market share does your organization have vis-a-vis your competitors? Maybe there's some young startup company that's all of a sudden leapfrogged you and you're wondering what the heck are they doing and how much market share do they actually have right now, right? So gaining that external perspective helps you better track performance over time, helps you understand what some of those leapfrog behaviors are, what's going on there, and why that might be triggering the startup to move quicker than you are. Understand and target product development and investments that need to be made in these segments, explore opportunities for inorganic or organic growth. We do a lot of work in pricing and go-to-market strategies, right? I've got this new thing. I need to figure out how to put it into the market so we can gain share here. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples on what that looks like. Oh, sorry, next slide. Thank you. So this is an example of a MECO chart. Eric alluded to it really quickly, but I just want to, for everyone's edification, make sure this is clear. So a MECO chart is just a really great way at visualizing a ton of data. So I'm going to walk you through this. And I should just say, MECO actually comes from the Finnish textile brand Merimeco, which was popular in the 50s and 60s. So if you are a sartorially inclined person, you might be familiar, but it was characterized by these bright, colorful patterns in clothing and textiles. And it's actually where MECO charts got their name. Just a fun little fact here. But they are really colorful and kind of beautiful visualizations of a whole bunch of quantitative data. And in these cases, that quantitative data is pulled from a lot of desk research and a lot of qualitative interviews to understand how this works. So in this particular case, let's just dig in. I recognize this is redacted, so kind of go with me on the theme here, not necessarily all the juicy details. So this client was sort of saying, you know, we have a fair bit of market share in most of these industries, or one of the big four players in this particular industry, but we want to understand what the white space opportunities are for us, because we haven't been able to make any meaningful inroads to increase share within some certain subsegments. So we did this MECO chart for them. And as you can see here, it's giving the subsegments of this broader market in biologics, as well as the market share that each competitor has, as well as if you look at the top row, the growth rates over the course of the next 5 years, and the size of each subsegment in the market. So that 448, that's $1 million. The G equals the CAGR, right, by subsegment. So in this particular case, take a look at segment 3. This one's kind of interesting. So you see here that smallest subsegment of this entire market, but growing at the fastest rate. So even though it's only $56 million, over the course of the next 5 years, with an almost 20% growth rate, which is nearly double what most of the other subsegments in this market have, it has the potential to be really big and very meaningful. Take a look at what else you can see. This market is pretty fragmented. So you've got a couple big players, but no one has a really meaningful chunk of this market. So in this particular case, our client was able to identify opportunities for inorganic growth by taking some of those smaller players that you see kind of towarety, the top, the violet-y, purple, blue colors, and identify those as potential targets for acquisition so that they could make a meaningful chunk of this segment. So just look at how interesting that is. You can see so much here. Go ahead and head to the next slide here. So this is now, if you were to double click on one of those bars, you can gain even more perspective here. So you can see this is now a different MECO. So, I'm just kind of using this for illustrative purposes, but you could see within this particular segment, there are subcomponents that there are players then that have different percentages of share, and we can segment that competition as well as kind of understand what's happening here. So in this particular case, our client was trying to understand how they could capture more growth, and they were able to identify a couple of specific systems that within these subsegments would allow them to really capitalize on kind of the value proposition for them. So just think about how rich all of this information is. These two different MECO examples were, I think, built from around 30 to 35 interviews. So think about how much qualitative information, desk research as well, of course, how much qualitative information can then give you a really clear quantitative look at what's happening in your market and where your opportunities are. Next slide. So now let's take a look at the competitive environment, right? Something that people feel like they often understand without necessarily understanding, right? If I'm Coca-Cola and Eric is Pepsi, right? I'm not just gonna call up Eric and say, hey buddy, what's up? How are you guys doing? You doing great in the snack space or the non-soda fizzy beverage space? What are you guys doing? What's your secret sauce, right? He would never pick up the phone for me. And of course, he's not going to give that information. So this is our way of understanding a little bit more. What does that competitive environment look like, right? How does Coca-Cola have a better understanding of what Pepsi, I'm just using two silly examples, is doing, and how can they meaningfully make strategic plans to be able to take more market share, right? What are the headwinds and tailwinds impacting this environment? Strengths and weaknesses of current competitors. Maybe they've recently made some big acquisitions that give them opportunities to create more of a pipeline or bundle a whole bunch of services or offerings together in one bucket and sell all of that stuff together to one client. Right? Are there disruptive technologies, right? We hear about AI and generative AI being such an incredible tool. What is that doing to this industry? What is that doing to competitors? How are they trying to harness that? New business models, other differentiation capabilities, right? So it helps you identify opportunities, threats, right? Plan for some changes that might be upcoming, leverage new technologies or tools, understand where investment models might be might be important, and explore new business models to be able to improve profitability or grow revenue, right? Growing the entire size of the pie, maybe. So go ahead and head to the next slide. So I've just, scoped a couple of examples that I think give some picture on this. These are spider charts. They're a really great tool for understanding capabilities and where different companies compare to others. So basically, in this case, you see we're kind of overlaying the strengths of different companies by key areas, right? And so we, for this particular client, chose a series of competitors that they've really, really struggled to win against. And we said, maybe you're not focusing in the right areas. Look at this. Company C, that was in fact our client in this case, has a right to win because they're really leveraging these key things. They've got a huge amount of technical service support that they're focused on. They're focused on customer loyalty. They're really getting those customers in and retaining them, right? So that's really important here as you look at what other competitors have focused on and what that means for them. I'm not going to belabor this too much, but on the right side, this was focused on a different type of market and we were able to cross compare them. So much rich data here. Next slide, please. In this particular case, this is just plotting using a bubble chart to sort of plot where customer prioritization with different types of technology, that's the solutions that you're seeing here in the different colors, aligns against what customers' needs are. So we plotted customer satisfaction on the y-axis and customers' prioritization for investment on the x-axis, right? So we were able to identify the key solutions that would be good investments for this particular client because of the fact that we know that customers are really prioritizing them and they have high satisfaction. Whereas our client had focused on some of the solutions that you actually see in the soft dotted blue dotted area. And we said, don't prioritize there, right? That's not really where they're trying to go. There's more investment opportunity here. So just, again, a way to visualize a whole bunch of data. And I will say it's really important to note that, we're always focused on quantifying qualitative information, but it's also important. Sometimes we get information from a client and we qualify the quantitative. So maybe they say, well, this has been our market leading product. We know that customers are investing. That's great. That makes a ton of sense. But maybe the answer is, where are they going from here? They've made that investment now. Maybe they're not planning on making any more investment in this particular product line for 10 years. And they're assuming that there's no more spend on that product for 10 years. So where are the pockets of opportunity for new spend or something like that? Next slide. And then finally, strategic positioning. So Eric alluded to some of these. I'll keep this relatively light touch, but what is it that you need to understand here? How do customers view your business? What values do they associate with you? Is there stickiness in kind of the relationship that you have with them? How are you being perceived by them? And how are you positioning yourself to be able to kind of gain more customer traction? Are customers being motivated to switch for some reason, right? Is that stickiness eroding because of price increases, right? Something like that. And this kind of helps our clients understand how they should, transition their product offerings, develop strategies to better differentiate what they currently have. Maybe new product development. We actually really need to invest here. We don't have a thing that solves this particular problem. We got to build a widget for that. And maybe it's about meeting customers where they are on their buying journey. Our customers aren't quite ready to spend another $100,000 on this type of a product. What are the places that we can meet them at that they are willing to spend? We'll just show a couple of quick examples here. So in this case, this was an opportunity for the client to see kind of different suppliers and services that they were offering over the life cycle of kind of when a client was buying and where there was core differentiation in the product. So, I mean, this information, you can see just how rich that can be, where you can identify where a product has really strong market potential, right? Where it's meeting the clients across the life cycle of when they buy, what they do. And it also gives an opportunity to say, where should we be growing? Where should we be prioritizing, right? I think this is a great chance to, in this particular case, we were kind of showing the client where they need to be investing based on what current offerings that they have. So go ahead and head to the next slide. And then just another example, right? So this is just a nice little 2x2 chart. Here we were plotting the attractiveness for customers based on a specific set of qualities and client capabilities. So we were sort of like, where is there better alignment with our clients' capabilities, right? What do these guys do well? And what is the attractiveness to the customer that they're trying to sell to, right? So how can they better distinguish themselves by offering a specific type of solution that's more appealing to what the customer wants, not just the stuff that you buy, right? If you're a hammer, sometimes everything looks like a nail, but instead it's about saying, wait a minute, what tool do I actually need? Let me check in my toolbox and find a tool that's more precision oriented to the problem that we're solving for with our customer. So again, these are just a couple of examples, but I think they give a lot of perspective on the types of information and how rich that information is that you can gain just by doing this type of external work. Just a little bit on BroadBranch Advisors, since we really glossed over that quickly at the beginning. We are a boutique strategy consulting firm. We've been doing this thing for a long time, 18 years. And I think the thing that I'm most proud about in this slide is not necessarily how many countries or how many pieces of work we've done, but that top middle one, client repeat rate, right? At the end of the day, we thrive on referral business and repeat business. So the work that we deliver to our clients is useful, is meaningful, and it makes them say, wow, that was really valuable. I want to use them again when I need those external perspectives. We don't post on billboards. We don't do lots of advertising or marketing. That's not really the way we work. We're kind of seen as a stealth back pocket tool that you say, when I need a scalpel, I pull out BroadBranch Advisors and I can do a really precision piece of work. So that's how we run. And then I think there's just maybe one more slide. Yep. And we work in a whole bunch of different areas. So Damon mentioned it when we were talking at the very beginning, because their business works across a lot of different areas. But for us, you could be in organic growth mode, in a go-to-market mode, again, competitor analysis, inorganic, you want to do some due diligence, or even target analysis or hunting list creation, right? Who are the companies that I could buy down the road? So kind of across the life cycle of that process, if a company is in that growth mode or that strategic planning mode where they need to see those external perspectives, that's where we can help. We work across a whole bunch of different industries, and we have a lot of industry expertise, but ultimately you don't call us because we're the foremost experts in fill in the blank, whatever field you're focused on. You call us because you say, I need perspective on this, and we go out and find the people who can answer those questions. So rather than relying on, again, that N of one with a consultant that has massive expertise in one area, but might be biased, we say, let's go talk to 50 people who are, plant managers at precision manufacturing facilities. And then the last thing I think that's just really important is, it's easy to do this work in areas that you know well. It's harder to do it in areas that you don't know well. We also focus on conducting the interviews that we talked about in local languages. So if you say, I want to better understand the market in China, what does that look like? We have native Chinese speakers, Spanish, French, German, Portuguese, Japanese, Korean. The best way to interview is to do it in native language. And so we keep all those capabilities on staff and can do those. I know I ran through that really quickly, but I think we're right on time. So I'll hand it back to Damon.
Yeah, actually,
or Eric, sorry.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and sum up here a little bit. If we can go to the next slide, Damon. So thank you, Courtney. I just kind of want to quickly sum up, and then we can transition into the Q&A. So we talked, the theme of the day was bringing the outside in. And we talked about the importance of starting with market, working with your strategic planning team, your leadership team to provide the frame up for, okay, which market, what exactly market, what are the critical questions that we have? Then the ability to work with Courtney and BroadBranch Advisors and her team to get that first person information from the people in the external world, that we can build out a fact-based view to that. And then lastly, that critical question, which is, after we've got that information, what problem or opportunity does this represent for us? It's the synthesis of this down to the critical few about where, what does this really mean for our organization? And then that moves us into initiative development. And I've just seen over and over again that this process of market, situational analysis, external view really be helpful in solving one of the key problems that I see come up often in strategic planning, which is, how do you avoid outdated, biased, or incomplete internal thinking impacting your initiatives? There are other challenges that frequently come up in the strategic planning process. Those include insufficiently detailed initiatives, poor linkage to kind of resources. So we've got the plan, but then there's no money, right? Ambiguous or absent executive support. The execs are in, and then after the plan's done, the day-to-day tyranny takes over. And then also just the strategy activation. How do you make sure that you've got a tight process for activating the strategy, following through? That's also iterative and learning from where you're having successes and where you might need to course correct. If we talked a lot about that first challenge today, if that challenge or any of these other challenges seem pertinent to your particular organization's strategic planning process, please reach out to us at info@leanfocus.com. We'll be glad to help talk you through that and see what additional support we might be able to provide. So with that, I'll hand it back to Damon.
Thanks, Eric, and thanks, Courtney. So just a quick reminder, if you navigate to our leanfocus.com website and click on the Thought Leadership tab, you will see this webinar archived here in about a day or two. And you'll also see subsequent webinars that we've done in the past that you can also look at on your own time, that you can look at different topics and things like that. But you can also register for upcoming webinars here. And in addition to the webinars, there's a host of thought leadership articles, dozens and dozens of them that have been written by many of our different practice leaders on the various topics of lean applied to those different areas that we talked about earlier in the presentation. So with that, I am going to moderate some questions. And just a reminder to the people on the call, there's still quite a few of you. You can enter your questions in the Q&A panel, and then I will tee those up to Eric and Courtney. I'll let you guys arm wrestle over who answers the questions. All right, you ready? Okay, so question is kind of like an observation and looking for your thoughts on this. It seems like private equity doesn't embrace these sorts of tools and processes, that they're more reactive in terms of M&A, like responding to SIMs and companies that are for sale versus actually making a MECO, and I'm adding more color here, making a MECO to be proactive about where are we going to target, what companies should we go after, and why. Can one of you or both of you comment on that?
Yeah, I can take that one. I've had a chance to work a lot with private equity. Was inside a company doing strategic planning that was owned by a private equity firm, and I think that's right. It's a kind of it's a challenge in some ways that most private equity firms kind of do tend to just work off of what's actionable. So there isn't necessarily a strong market map. A view towards building out the M&A funnel. I've done some of that work with some of the private equity firms, and I think it's really powerful in terms of being able to build out an M&A list of potential targets that aren't just the usual suspects. And so I think that is an exciting and consequential area of this. I also see that after the acquisition, oftentimes there's post-acquisition strategic planning. And I have had a number of private equity firms bring us in and get involved to try and help the team have that more fact-based external view and to set the strategy. Because post-acquisition, everyone's open to change and doing things differently, at least initially. And it's a great time to kind of bring that in. So I don't know, Courtney, if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, I think I would just share that for whoever wrote this in, I think it's right. I do see a shift happening, and I hope it's one that sticks. I think as money is more expensive and it's become more challenging to invest in businesses, there is a more thoughtful process that goes into that. So I think the opportunity is ripe, and now is a good time to do it. But I think there's also a recognition that we have to not only be reactive to what we see, but also anticipatory to what's coming and the opportunities that pose, because deal making is coming back. And I think there are more deals happening, and hopefully that continues into 2025, et cetera. But it means that companies need to be a lot more thoughtful. And I think PE isn't throwing money around like they used to a couple of years ago. So that thoughtful process, I think, requires kind of what Eric and I have been talking about the last 50 minutes.
Great. The next question is around workflow and or jobs to be done. So the question is around, could a MECO be adapted by looking at the MECO based on jobs to be done or workflow? So for example, if I'm an instrumentation company that owns this piece of the workflow within a hospital, could I look at a MECO to see what the opportunities are right and left in the workflow as it represents instrumentation, opportunity, reagents, or can you comment on that?
Yeah, so I'll go first, Eric, and there's a really easy answer. Yes. That's the whole point of what a MECO does, right? It allows you to see not just yourself, but left and right of you. There's also a lot of other tools that we can use within the context of the MECO work that allow us to gain qualitative insights on sort of that jobs to be done piece, right? So for example, we might do a project where we talk to 20 people to understand within that instrumentation space, what does that look like? And the competitor A, B, and C are based like this, your client's competitor D. And maybe they say, that's interesting, but we're really getting beat by competitor A. I wonder, how big is their sales force there? So we could do like a feet on the street analysis where we basically say, help us double click a little bit more and understand how heavily are they investing in their sales team to be able to drive that business. And maybe they say, holy cow, this company's within this particular segment, their sales team is 10x what ours is. So if they've done an order of magnitude more investment in their sales force, maybe, our client needs to really step up how they're thinking about putting their sales force in place.
I'll add that we often advise clients to do pretty straight ahead industry mechas first, just to get the landscape down. But then the advantage is to move into proprietary segmentation. And that proprietary segmentation can be based on a lot of different dimensions, including jobs to be done. The rule there is that the segments need to be non-overlapping, mutually exclusive, so that they really represent distinct segments. But once you have that, the standard one down, moving towards that proprietary segmentation is oftentimes the long-term basis of competitive advantage within your market and for your company. So hugely supportive of that kind of development.
This one is part comment, part question. So I've been a part of strategic planning processes for lots of years, and I've never used a third party to gain insights. Completely makes sense. I'm bought in. Can you tell me why more companies don't do this today?
I guess I could speak to that. Okay. Go ahead, Courtney, please.
I think it's really simple and it's totally understandable, but I think it's a little bit of an ego thing, right? It's hard to say, I don't know something about this work that I'm supposed to be doing day in, day out, every day, all day long. And it's about saying, sometimes I need that external perspective. Sometimes you have someone take a picture of you that you weren't expecting and you're not like smiling, totally ready for it. And it's like, not your best side, or whoa, my butt looks way bigger in that than I thought because they took it from behind, or whatever. It's about that recognition that like not everything is going to always be viewed through your lens. And so being able to take yourself out of that and say, I don't know what I don't know, but what a good time to figure it out is now when I'm in that planning process. Sorry, Eric, you go ahead.
No, I think to add on to that, a couple of things I've seen are executives often think that what they know is sufficient. If they think that more information is needed, they often task product management or the strategic planning folks with, hey, let's talk with some of our salespeople or talk with customers. And so people who have busy day jobs are then expected to do interviews, qualitative interviews, and then that doesn't necessarily work out that great. Or if they're trying to do an external view, hey, let's buy a market research report. And I don't know about your experience, but at least mine in many industries I've been involved with is that the third-party market research reports rarely give me the kind of external insight because they're too broad and they're not specific to how to frame things up. And I think the last challenge, frankly, is that the strategic planning process often doesn't have its own budget. And so there isn't necessarily pre-thought about funding, which is for strategic planning, because this costs money. It doesn't cost a fortune, but it's not free. And that's interesting because here you're pulling together the key leadership of the company, setting the direction for the future of the company, putting initiatives together that are going to involve a lot of people, a lot of follow through. And oftentimes there's no budget for making sure that you've got the fact base established to make sure that that's a strong process. And I think it's an interesting reality that I see a lot of clients face.
This one is around what our industry expertise is. So what is your core industry expertise? Do you work in international manufacturing or process analytics, for example?
So I guess we probably both have different answers to this, but BroadBranch Advisors works across a whole bunch of industries. Our sort of core pillars are in life sciences and healthcare, in technology and manufacturing, and in technology and cybersecurity and IT and AI. Those are kind of the very high level buckets, but ultimately, at the end of the day, this is about saying not what do we know, but really who can we find? And that's kind of the secret sauce of what we do. So ultimately, any industry can be a client, with the idea that I think companies with high technology and with relative opacity in terms of kind of the way customers buy and sell, those are kind of the right types of candidates, and usually B2B.
Yeah, it's fascinating that my background is in synthetic organic chemistry, believe it or not, but it's interesting how so many of these things transcend industry. Currently, I'm working with on nuclear reactors, kitchen cabinets, and red light cameras, very different businesses. And so many of these strategic issues and topics are really universal, irrespective of the industry. And within Lean Focus, there's people who've got experience in pretty much every corner of the commercial world.
All right. So we're coming up on time. Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Courtney. It was a very informative topic. Just a reminder, this recording will be emailed to the email address you used to sign up for this webinar. You should expect that in your inbox in about a day. And you can also watch it on YouTube. And thanks, everybody, for participating today. And I hope that you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. And I hope to see you soon on another Lean Focus webinar series. Take care. Bye now.
Thanks, everyone.
We're off.